makes their own decisions and everybody makes their own choices, but they're not the only ones that suffer the consequences.
Jill Duggar and her husband, Derick Dillard, are ready to share their story. Their new book, Counting the Cost, promises to reveal the unedited truth about the Duggars.
For as long as I can remember, there was this sense of bewilderment with people looking at our family and just seeing all of us lined up in red dresses, out at wherever, and are they all yours?
Welcome down the rabbit hole, friends. We're here tonight. I'm going to be announcing one of the winners of the book giveaway. I'll have the timestamp listed below where you can find the winner. And I've actually decided I'm going to do additional giveaways of Jill's book in Amazon gift card form because so many people said that they wanted it. I think there were like almost 700 entries. So I'm going to go back and do some additional giveaways, but I'm going to space them out so that my husband doesn't notice all of the Amazon gift card purchases I'm making. So he won't be like, what are you doing? And I'm like, it's for Jill. And he's like, who is Jill? And then we have to get in this whole discussion where he's like, Katie, you have real family and friends you could be buying gifts for. And I don't want to hear any of that. That's just negativity I don't need in my life. So let's forget about that. There will be additional giveaways, and I'm actually going to be doing another giveaway for my members. So that's coming out in the next day or two. Okay. This chapter is called Clipped Wings and a Hill to Die On, Chapter 3. This chapter is mainly about everything that changed as the Duggar family got involved in pretty much full-time filming. Now, my understanding is what they would do is film really heavily for a few months out of the year, like 3 months of time, and then the rest of the year they would be off and doing their like typical home thing of traditional homeschooling. But during that 3-month period of time, homeschooling would be really put on the back burner, and their lives were quite disrupted in many ways. Jill describes the fact that she and her sisters were primed and educated about talking points that they would say when they would go on TV shows for interviews. They were always very careful about how they spoke about their family and the show. They had really been taught to speak a certain way and to always recite the same talking points. And once again, they're constantly bringing up the line that they've heard their dad say many times before when people would ask them, like, how long do you think the show can go on for? There's a specific example of Jessa saying, well, I don't know about that, but I do know that we feel it's just like a window of opportunity that God has given our family. So we remember Jim Bob was constantly talking to his kids about this is our window of opportunity, and that's why we're going to take it, regardless of what's going on in the background with Josh, because that was happening at the beginning of all of this. And he said, we cannot miss our window of opportunity. And we have the kids repeating those same lines here in their interviews. Jill discusses the many perks that the Duggars received, such as traveling, and they had money to now go on their missionary trips down to El Salvador, so they all got to go together, and this is where Jill discovered that she really wanted to do missionary work, so this was a huge deal for her, and the money that they got from the show was contributing to them being able to do this. We already talked about the fact that the show helped them build the house, so they've gotten so many benefits from participating in 19 Kids and Counting. Jill says that even though the show brought so many good things to her family, there was a sense of anxiety and frustration in her about some of the filming. And she said it was because oftentimes a big part of the show was that the film crew was planning and enacting surprises for the Duggar kids. Like maybe they all have to go somewhere and do something, and this could be heavily stressful, I think especially for like Jill. I wonder if we heard from someone like James, who was much younger at the time, it might have been like, oh, this was so fun. But the older siblings are the ones that are having to like prepare the kids to go, keep them calm and quiet while they're out and about, following the rules of their parents and providing care for the younger siblings as well. So Jill says that she had discomfort and anxiety whenever a surprise was sprung upon them. And she always had to kind of keep up this rehearsed way of acting when she was in front of the cameras because she got the sense that it was important to her parents. She doesn't talk about ever being explicitly told, like, we're going to pretend to be a certain way. But she just felt like there was this overwhelming pressure that they weren't going to need to put their best foot forward at all times during filming. This was also the time in which Jill and some of the older sisters, they were given the job of opening some of Jim Bob's mail that he was receiving about the show. And she says that this is where she was exposed to people really speaking negatively about the Duggars. They did receive a lot of really positive, good fan mail. They also received mail that was like, you are overpopulating the earth. Why are you doing this? And this is when she really realized that there were people out there that hated them. And this was anxiety producing for her as well. Now, here's a big piece of information that I think we could all kind of surmise, but she is validating all of that for us. She says that the success of the TLC show changed their position within the IBLP, and they began to like rise in the ranks. They were considered now sort of like a model family, even though they weren't a model family. She says they didn't really add up. They really didn't have a lot of the character qualities that some of the other model families possessed, how perfect they looked, how perfect they acted. She felt like they didn't really meet that standard actually, but because the show had been successful, they now were appealing to people like Gothard, and they were put on stage and they were constantly being asked to speak at conferences. And it's interesting because they're part of this group of people, the model family people, but they don't really fit in, at least from Jill's point of view. This is when Jill saw a big change in her dad, Jim Bob, because all of this power kind of rushed in for Jim Bob and his situation. Now, people like Gothard were actually calling him on the phone and asking his opinion on like different steps to make within like the structure of the IBLP. They were asking for his opinion on like advertising, things like this. And Jill would actually overhear her dad on the phone with these people. Her dad even would like have the kids sit around and listen to him, put people on speakerphone while he spoke back and forth with these people in positions of power. Partially, I wonder, I mean, it sounds like she's kind of saying like he wanted people to know. He wanted us to know, like, look at what our ministry is doing. All these people are coming to me asking all these questions. And secondarily, I think it's also a way to sort of further indoctrinate them. Like, this is how we talk. This is how we present ourselves when Gothard calls us. Look at me. Look at how I'm doing it. Kind of like hoping that the kids are going to grow up and take on positions of power as well. And we certainly saw that. As being something that Jim Bob was heavily invested in when it came to Josh Duggar. I think that Jim Bob was always priming him to be quite powerful in the political arena, to accomplish all the things that Jim Bob had not been able to accomplish. So I'm sure he was hoping to prime his other children as well in different ways. Jill talks extensively about the 7 basic principles of the IBLP and how they shaped the way that Jim Bob and Michelle brought the kids up, that they were indoctrinated from very young to believe that they must obey their parents or any person in authority of all time, honor thy father and thy mother. Honoring parents, even into adulthood, was such a big deal that even if your parents weren't Christian, it would be a sin to disobey them. That's interesting. If you wanted to get married and they refused to give you their blessing, IBLP teaching was on the side of the parents, Jill writes. And in talking about all of this, Jill also talks about like the extreme fear that she experienced when thinking about stepping out of the umbrella of protection, which had been established in her life. She felt that God's judgment would then rain down on her and something terrible could happen not only to her, but to the people that she loved. So this was like a lot of burden to carry around every day. And Jill writes, but no matter how much Pops tried to keep our wings clipped, or how badly he tried to keep us huddled in close underneath his own umbrella of protection, there was one child he couldn't prevent from making mistakes. It was Josh. A few years after he was sent away, he was in trouble again. He'd been caught looking at pee on the phone of somebody he'd been working with. Okay, so we've heard this before, and Jill is confirming it, that Josh was on the campaign trail working for Jim Holt, and he had been caught looking at PORN. We don't know whose phone it was, but I think at that age, outside of the IBLP, that might have been like a very normal thing to have happen. It might be something that you talk to a child about, but Josh got in a lot of trouble for it. And because of this, they packed Josh's bags and sent him off to rehab again. We've also many people within that community blame Josh for the fact that Jim Holt then didn't win whatever political campaign he was running. And this time Josh went away for several months to do some kind of demanding manual labor in the company of good Christian folk and to get himself back on track. And Jill writes, and just like before, we didn't talk about it much. Yeah, I mean, it's become incredibly obvious that a big part of what created all of these deviant behaviors in Josh Duggar is being raised to believe that all sexual behaviors are bad. So he had no outlet. He was dealing with a lot of hormonal changes in his body. He's the oldest out of all of them. He probably felt like he had no one to talk to. He didn't have anyone to talk to. He had no outlet for what was going on, all the changes that were being made, and he was being told that every little sin was equal. They were all the worst kind of sins. Also in this chapter, Jill just talks about watching her dad start to accrue more property, doing really well with the car lot. And so she's seeing these like financial gains and maybe also like career gains for Jim Bob that weren't present before they started doing the show. Okay, and then the second part of chapter 3 is all about Jill being introduced to Derick through her father, Jim Bob. So basically, Jim Bob creates this relationship with Derick before Jill ever meets him. They're sort of like, I guess, prayer partners while Derick is living abroad and doing missionary work. And the situation is that Jim Bob knew that Jill wanted to do missionary work. And I guess he created this close bond with Derick, thought pretty highly of him and the work that he was trying to do. So he started trying to have his daughters listen in on calls with Derick. So Derick would call Jim Bob, he would put it on speakerphone, and they would kind of all talk. And then eventually he would be like, Jill, how about just you come and talk? And it kind of progressed in that way. Jill she describes just feeling like very embarrassed by the whole thing and thinking it was silly and not like wasn't going to lead to anything. And then in the end, she decided that she really did have somewhat of an interest in Derick. The one thing that I found was kind of interesting is that Jim Bob and Jill, I guess they're looking at whether or not they could fly out to meet Derick while he's doing his missionary work. And they realized that maybe they could do this for the show because it seems like the show then could pay for it. And so the TLC show says that they'll go ahead and pay for Jim Bob and Jill to do this trip, but they'll only pay for them to be out there for 2 days and film them for 2 days, which Jill was like, that's just not going to be long enough for me. So they agreed that they would go and do the filming and have it paid for 2 days. And then she and Jim Bob would stay like an extra period of time. I think it's almost like 2 weeks or something, and spend time with Derick. And that I guess they would end up paying for the rest of the time that they were there. And so it was all kind of awkward, but a big part of this was that Jill wanted to talk to TLC and kind of have it written into the contract that if things didn't work out with Derick, they wouldn't show the filming on TV because she didn't want to meet Derick, decide that it was just not the right fit, have it be publicized all over TLC, and then decide that she wasn't going to court this person anymore. And TLC said, no, we're going to go ahead and air it regardless because there's no way we would pay for you to go there and do all this filming and not get a return on it. So even if it ends up not working out, we're still going to put it on TV. So this was kind of interesting to hear about, right? That, from Jim Bob and Jill's standpoint, it's sort of like, well, then maybe they should have been willing to pay for it on their own so that Jill would not be in the situation where her courtship gone wrong would have to be all over the TLC show. But they went through with it. They went ahead and flew out to meet Derick. And then they had to film kind of a fake goodbye scene because the filming ended after 48 hours. And then Jill was going to stay like another week and a half. But it ended up working out really well for Jill because she says she fell in love with Derick. He was the right fit for her. And she was grateful that they got to go on the trip. Oh, so reading again, it says that it was just one extra week. And she writes, I am so thankful for that extra week we got to spend together without the film crew. We were able to get to know each other better. And over the days, there were little snatched moments when Pops gave us space and our feelings grew. And she said before she left, she ended up saying, I love you. So that was really sweet. She says that she fell deeply in love with Derick. She found him to be polite and respectful, and that her father was genuinely impressed with him. And she was interested in missionary work, and this is what he was doing with his life. But once again, now like a big part of creating this relationship with Derick was talking to him about whether or not he was going to be comfortable with all the demands of filming. That started right from the beginning. I guess like from the beginning, Jim Bob was telling her, and Jill had to bring it up with Derick, like, are you going to be willing to fill out contractual obligations to do this filming with me? Because this is part of my family's ministry. And Derick said that he was interested in being a part of it and he would fulfill whatever obligations were needed. Like, for example, when he finally came back from Nepal, Jill didn't really want to like film him arriving, but they had to. And part of that also was that Derick's friends and family had to wait like outside the airport or in another part of the airport so that they could initially just film Jill greeting him, Jill and her family greeting him on his way home. Then he had to walk on to the other part of the airport where then his mom and his family and friends could be like, Derick, we're so glad you're here. But it's like a lot of rules and situations were manipulated for the filming that would affect Derick's like everyday life. So Jill, she really had to let him know that this was a part of marrying her, being on the show. And also like shortly after they arrived home, Derick ended up taking a job at Walmart, which I didn't realize he was in the accounting area of Walmart for a while, and he was working really hard. That's very much emphasized here in the book. He's working like almost around the clock to be able to afford like a place for them to live and all the little things that they need as a newly starting out couple. They were talking about getting married and moving forward with their lives. And that's when Derick finds out that his mom has stage 4 cancer. This was like a big, obviously a huge situation in his life. But again, there's all this stuff going on where they're still required to do this filming when Derick is having to work and trying to provide like some care and support to his mom. This seems like it was kind of an issue for Derick. Now, he does, at this stage, he's not complaining. According to Jill, he's not complaining at all. He's doing it all. And this made her love him that much more because he would, forego sleep to get everything done. And she just thought he was such a hard worker and this is great. And he's never complaining. And she didn't know how she would be able to do all of this. Like, he's doing it. She writes, I was witness to the strength of his character, the depth of his faith, and the power of the bonds of love that held his family together. He continued to work to check in on his mom and help her where he needed, supporting his wonderful stepdad, Ronnie, who was caring for her 24/7. Derick continued to attend seminary, plan the wedding, and still make himself available for filming. So there was a lot going on, but I think deep down, like, this is how it built for Derick. Like, it may start out with, okay, we just need a little bit more from you. You're going to have to do extra stuff for us. Okay. And he goes on and does the filming and does what he needs to do for TLC. But this is the beginning, and it keeps building and building as their life goes on together and they try to create a life together. The filming requirements continue to grow. So this is the beginning of it. Right now, he's still kind of going along with the whole deal. but things are going to change down the road. Another thing that she talks about in this chapter is how the wedding was manipulated a lot by the filming too. Like no one could talk about when it was happening. She wanted people to be able to take pictures on their phones and send them to her at the end of the ceremony, and TLC put the kibosh on all of that. So there were little things that Jill wanted out of important events in her life that she couldn't have because of the filming, because of the requirements and rules of TLC. In the background, after the wedding, Kathy, Derick's mom, was still quite sick in the hospital, and there was a lot of medical personnel who were saying like she's not going to make it. So this was a big deal. And on the day of the wedding, they actually had to, they weren't sure she was going to be able to come, but she did. She was wheeled in, I think, by her husband. And, you know, Jill says she was so grateful for that. But with all of this going around in the background on the wedding day, Jim Bob Duggar approaches Jill as like she's getting, I think, ready to leave for her and Derick to go on their honeymoon, which was not going to be filmed. And a lot of the other children have had their honeymoons filmed, but Derick and Jill said no thank you. So as she was like running out the door, her dad, Jim Bob, slips her a contract and says, I need you to sign this real quick before you go. Real quick before you go. All the kids are signing it. Just sign it real quick. And she says, what's this for? And Jim Bob says, oh, it's just about how you're going to get paid. I looked at the papers sitting on the dining room table, single sheets with signature lines on each of our names printed. A few had already been signed. I didn't see any extra papers to read. So it looks like it was just a signature sheet, potentially. And I didn't really know what it was about, but I didn't question my dad. After all, in all my life, I'd never had reason not to trust Pops. He knew best and always had. So I picked up the pen and I signed. And that's the end of chapter 3. Chapter 4 is called Costs, and it's all about the costs of that signature and everything that happened to her and Derick because she signed that paper. Okay, below you will see the name of the person who is the first winner of a Amazon gift card, which you can use to get the book if you would like to. Please email me. I'll have my email below, and I can work out getting the gift card to you. I want to say thank you to all of you. We've actually been really quite sick here. I think we did not have COVID. It sounds like we probably have the flu. My little Jackie's so funny. So just prayers for everyone to get better, but also for me to deal with this school bus situation. We only live like a few minutes from the school, so I can just drive them in. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I hope that you'll join me again next time as we head down yet another rabbit hole.